Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another video. Welcome back to the Beard Barn. Man, it has been a while since we did a video like this, but I'm here, you're here, we're making this video, and it's going to be a good time. And what we're doing today is we're going to be talking about what I've got rigged up right now and why for the month of October. You know, I was getting some stuff rigged up, getting ready to actually go on a trip, and I pulled some rods and reels out of the boat that I knew that I would need to take with me on this trip. And these are things that for me, like if I was going to pull out some rods and reels and go about anywhere in the country right now in the month of October, this is the stuff that I would take with me and have ready to go so that I could catch some fish. And so that's what we're going to be going over today. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you guys, everything that I'm going to talk about is going to be linked down in the description. It'll take you to Tackle Warehouse. You guys can purchase anything that I talk about today, and when you do that, it helps to support this channel, keep gas in the boat, gas in the truck, and keep us going in the right direction. But without further ado, let's get into it and let's start talking about these baits. And in no particular order, I'm gonna kind of start what's on top of the pile here. We're gonna start with a walking bait, a big walking bait, like the Berkley Jaywalker. You know, those bigger 3-hook size walking baits. This time of year, this is one of those baits that for me, you're not going to get a lot of bites on, but when you do get a bite on this thing, it is going to be a big one. This is such a confidence bait for me this time of year, especially in some sort of shad pattern like this bone one you guys can see here. I mean, you can see this thing has seen better days. It's got both eyes knocked off, hook rash all over it. I mean, it's missing a chunk out of the back. This is literally like one of my favorite topwaters that I have in the box. It's got all that mojo on it. You know what I mean? You got those baits that just have mojo on them. This is one of those baits, and I love it. I mean, like I said, it is a bait that you're not going to get a ton of bites on, but the ones you're going to get on it are going to be big ones. And you know, really what I focus on with this bait is two things. Big flats, you know, big open flats where those fish can push bait fish up onto there. And you're going to get a lot of migratory fish this time of year. They're going to be roaming around. They're going to be looking for food, and you just got to intercept them sometimes. And one of the best ways to do that is just to cover a whole ton of water with something like a walking bait. And then number two is going to be some sort of transitional bank, you know, where it goes from one type of bank to another, where it's like rock to mud, rock to sand, rock to pebbles, and or where there's a little bit of a transition up, you know, where those fish can be sitting in deep water but then also move right up into shallow water, feed, use it as an ambush point, and eat bait fish. And that right there is just such a phenomenal tool for me this time of year for putting big fish into the boat and into the kayak. The next one is going to be the bladed jig, and I have a total mess of rods sitting here. Like I said, I literally jerked them out of the boat. I'm gonna stick them in my kayak here in just a second. But the next one is going to be a bladed jig, and in particular, the Berkley Slobber Knocker. And it's gonna be one of those baits that if you're looking for that bigger than average bite, this is what I'm going to have tied on. Now, this is also another really phenomenal tool for grass. You know, I've also got a spinnerbait here, so you know, a little spoiler alert, we got a spinnerbait. But with the bladed jig, you know, a spinnerbait does really well in grass, but for some reason the bladed jig, I don't know if it's the action, if it's the, you know, the noise that blade makes or what it is, it just does a little bit better for me in grass than the spinnerbait actually does. And so this is a bait that I've got rigged up, especially when I'm fishing on lakes that have a bunch of aquatic vegetation. You know, I'm going to use it to fish into those mats where I'm actually going to pick up a frog or a punching rig or something like that. I'm going to use it to fish grass lines. I'm going to use it to fish lily pads. Just anywhere there's aquatic vegetation, the bladed jig seems to do a lot better job in those scenarios. And the Slobber Knocker does a really good job because of the way that it's designed. You guys can see there, and if you've not seen it, that hinge design on there really helps to push vegetation out of the way and cut through vegetation better than any other bladed jig that I've used. And this thing also does really, really well around wood cover as well. But I mean, a bladed jig, again, guys, it's one of those things that it is just such a confidence bait for me. I've got this thing tied on 365 24/7. I may have a dedicated rod and reel for this thing that literally it never gets cut off because it's something that works all year long. But this time of year, month of October, you know, when you're looking for that bigger than average bite, a bladed jig is going to be a great way to get it. Now, I'm going to be fishing mostly shad patterns. You know, I got this shad pattern. It's kind of a mix, a little bit of green pumpkin, a little bit of white, so it's kind of a mix of a shad pattern. But when I'm down here, down south, I'm going to be fishing a lot more shad patterns because primarily most of our fish are keyed in on shad. Yeah, they'll eat bluegills, yeah, they'll eat crawdads, but shad is going to be the primary forage this time of year. Now, when I'm go up north, which is where my trip is at, I'm heading up north, I'll probably tie on some more kind of green pumpkin-y bluegill looking patterns. It's just because those fish eat a lot more bluegill up there, and so it's something that they focus in on. But you know, having both of those at your disposal can be huge because there's going to be moments when they're really keyed in on the bluegills, there's going to be moments when they're really keyed in on the shad, and that's why I kind of like a little bit of a blend blend, you know, something that looks like a little bit of both. It can get those fish's attention, and you can do a really good job of switching it up just by switching the trailer. You know, you don't have to cut off your entire bladed jig. You just switch up that trailer color, and you're going to have something that looks more like a bluegill or more like a shad. The next one is going to be what I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the spinnerbait. Oh God, I love a spinnerbait. There is nothing quite like a spinnerbait bite. They thump this thing harder than they thump anything else, really, and it is one of my favorite ways to catch fish, especially this time of year. Now this, for me, throw it in a lot of the same places that I throw my topwater. You know, those big flats, those big expansive areas where those bass are just moving around and cruising around out there. I'm going to fish it near those transitional areas, around the tops of trees and stuff like that. That's where I'm going to pick up the spinnerbait. And you know, the spinnerbait does one job really, really well, and that is looking like a group of bait fish, or, you know, a few bait fish that are together. Those blades get to flashing, and all that gets to moving around, especially on a good sunny day like we have today, a little bit of wind. That bait right there is going to be just a huge key for me to putting fish into the boat and into the kayak. And as you guys can see, 99.9% of the time I'm fishing a shad pattern in a spinnerbait. There's a few key times when I'll pick up the bluegill patterns, but for the most part I'm trying to mimic shad with the spinnerbait, and I feel as though, you know, there's not many tools as effective as the spinnerbait. Now the spinnerbait I'm fishing is actually the Berkley Power Blade, and I want to mention this hook. This thing is an absolute gaff of a hook, and it gets them better than any other hook that I have used in the spinnerbait world. It's huge. I mean, you guys can see compared to my hand how big that hook actually is. I mean, it is a big hook, and it is one heck of a gaff of a hook, and it really, really gets them. And I love that. That's one thing about a spinnerbait. You know, you always had to run a trailer hook behind it, and that hook and the way that hook's designed almost eliminates the need for that, and that makes it super effective around wood cover, you know, just getting it through places that you wouldn't normally be able to get it if you had that trailer hook on it, while still having the reliability of getting those fish hooked really, really good when they run through it or just don't eat it super well. And the next one's going to be my favorite way to catch them ever. If I could do this 365 days a year, this is what I would do, and this is what I would throw. But this time of year, during the fall, anytime around matted vegetation, you know, where I'm fishing grass mats, where that is cheesed up on top and I'm trying to get those fish to bite, it is going to be the frog, hollow body frog. And in particular, a hollow body frog that I've modified just a little bit. And what I do to actually modify these frogs is put some little tungsten weights in them. I use some 1/96 ounce tungsten weights. I put 4 or 5 of them in there. It gives it just a little bit more weight to help compress that mat, and it allows those fish to really key in on that thing where it's at, and it also gives them something to listen to with that little bit of rattle. Now, hollow body frog, when you're fishing matted vegetation, in my mind, there's nothing quite as effective for covering an immense amount of water and really figuring out where those fish are at and getting bigger than average bites. For me, I always get that bigger than average bite on the hollow body frog. This time of year, if they're biting it, it's hard to pry it out of my hand, and it's hard to get me off the lake where they're biting it at, because it is, like I said, my absolute favorite way to catch a fish. Now, I got that paired up with some 65-pound braid 7.3 heavy fast action Veritas PLX 7-gear ratio Revo STX. The main purpose of this setup is to hit them hard, cut vegetation, and get them out of what they're in, because, you know, when that fish comes up, they're going to come up, they're going to eat that frog, they're going to get a mouthful of grass, they're going to get, you know, all wadded up in that grass. And so I have to make sure that I'm getting the big frog hooks through the grass into the roof of their mouth, cutting the grass that's in the way and getting them up out of that stuff and getting them coming towards the boat. And that is exactly what this setup is made for, is just hitting them hard and being able to just grind them out of that matted vegetation and get them into the boat. Because that's the hardest thing with frog fishing, is if you're not hitting them hard and you're not getting them out of that stuff quick enough, they're just going to mar you up in it, and you're going to lose a lot of frog fish. And so I think having a good heavy action rod like this PLX is key to putting frogfish into the boat. The last one that I've got tied on is something that's kind of new to me. You know, this is a bait that, if you guys have been watching the video, you know it's not a bait that I ever really threw until this year. And a few weeks ago went out and just absolutely crushed them on the Buzzbait, and have gained a lot of confidence in this bait. It's something I'm going to keep tied on all throughout the fall, because it's a bait that I'm learning. And that's really the biggest reason I have it tied on. I mean, obviously it catches fish, it sticks them really good with that big single hook, but I'm still in the learning process of learning this bait. And the best way to learn a bait is to just stick it in your hand and go, 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 go. And so that is what I have done with the Buzzbait. And I'm still experimenting with it. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure out what the best way and to fish it is, where to fish it at, and all those kinds of things. But I've had enough success on it now that I've gained the confidence in it enough to keep it in my hand and kind of start to figure out where it is the most effective. But yeah, guys, that is that's what I got rigged up right now, and that's why I've got it rigged up. You know, I'll also throw a spinning rod in there just because it's kind of like a what is it, the honorable mention. You just got to have a spinning rod. But how I want to catch them and the ways I like to catch big fish, those are the rods and reels that I do it with. But as always, guys, thank you for watching. Questions or comments, you know where to go leave them. Go click one of these videos popping up right here. And as always, you guys are sweet, and thank you for watching.